Lori Feldman has extensive experience working with children. That's Lori Fieldman, by the way, Lori Fieldman. Her extensive experience is really associated with working with children who have a family member that has passed away or that's dealing with significant illness. As a licensed clinical social worker, she provides a wide range of services. During the 90s, she actually found Marcy's Place. That's a free weekend camp for grieving children. Of course, as the founder, she had to create the program, train the staff, and supervise the operations. She followed that up with teaching continuing education units at the University of Chicago, her alma mater. And for the last 15 years, she's been the director of social services at the Les Turner ALS Foundation in Chicago. Lori is a frequent national and international presenter. We're pleased to welcome Lori Fieldman.
Thank you. I'll start up here anyway. As Cynthia said, my name is Lori Fieldman, and oh, wait a second, I forgot to ask about the little clicker. There it is, okay. Hold on one sec. Okay, well, my information isn't up there. That's okay. I work for the Les Turner ALS Foundation, which is near Chicago. It's in Skokie, Illinois. And I've been the director of social services for 15 years. And I always say I have the most amazing job ever. People tend to ask me, how can you do your job? How can you do this? And now I answer, how could I not? It's not really my job, it's my work. I'm part of a home care team. We don't do traditional home health, like the kind you'd get after surgery or something like that. We're all specialists in ALS, and we go into patients' homes. The nurses work with the patients on more of the medical issues, how to keep people as healthy and comfortable, and also able to have their home be accessible. So all of that within their environment. I have the privilege of working with the entire family on how to deal with ALS, or as I call it, the intruder. I also facilitate support groups, and I need to tell you that this feels like a support group to me. Not such a giant support group as I thought it would be, but I want to tell you to please feel free to interrupt anytime, and that can be with questions or comments or whatever. I really enjoy giving presentations to my colleagues, but I have to tell you I was the most excited to come here because I truly believe that those of you who have ALS and are dealing with the intruder while you're raising a family, definitely some of the most amazing people on earth, and you're my heroes. So thank you for having me here, and I want to thank Cynthia for extending the invitation. And I was very excited to come here because I found out that I could get a microphone that it would allow me to leave here and walk around. Which is really important. Hold on, if I can turn this on. Hello, here we go. Which is really important. Some of you might have heard me talk about this before, but next week when I go back to the Chicago area, I don't like to be up there. I like to be closer, like a support group, you know? So next week when I go back to Chicago, I have not one, but 2 meetings at my kids' schools. Some of you may be familiar with the process of an IEP, Individual Education Plan, or 504 plan. Okay, so I have 2 of those, 2 out of 3, and those are for ADHD, and I'm sure you can't imagine where they get that from, but I'm very grateful that they're going to let me wander around with you. Okay, but that is true. And on a more serious note, I want you to know that when I say that, I also think about how fortunate I am that I can walk around, because every day I meet people like those of you who are patients, I know not everybody here is, but those of you who are patients or love a patient or help care for a patient, and many of these patients tell me all the time how they used to cope with their life challenges by running, going to the gym, walking. If they're a little insane like I am, they might play basketball. Don't laugh at that. I do. Okay. Even coached my 12-year-old's team this year, and that was a boy, so that's another story. But anyway, so you've had all these ways to cope. Then you get the biggest challenge of your life, what I actually think is the biggest challenge anybody could face, which is ALS. And not only is it rude enough to come into your life and be the intruder, but it takes away your ability to utilize the coping skills that have always worked for you. So while I am here to talk about your kids and how to help your kids cope, I also want to make reference to the airlines. Why? This fits, hold on. Because they always say, you know, put your oxygen mask on first. Okay, so that means that we as parents kind of need to get ourselves together as much as we can, of course, on any given day, and that's a moving target. But we have to try and cope the best we can in order to model that for the kids. So I'll be talking about both today because we are so interrelated with our treasures. And thanks to all of you who were so sweet and kind and made one of my treasures who's sitting out in the hallway who came with me feel very welcome. I think he feels, I don't know what he'll tell his friends tomorrow, but anyway. All right, so where's that slide thing? Let's see. Okay, here we go. Anyway, so getting back to helping your kids cope, one expression that one of my 40-ish-year-old patients uses is, we're working with the hand we've been dealt, Lori. This is the hand we've been dealt. And he doesn't say it in a real religious way or anything like that, although certainly I've heard, you know, a lot of different religious variations on that, and that's fine too. But I think it's a good way to look at it when you're able to get to that point. There's a lot of angst before you can ever say, oh, well, this is the hand we've been dealt. Easier said than done. I always tell my families, and I call them my families, not like a boss who says, this is my staff, or that kind of thing, because it's kind of like we're together. So I'm their social worker, and they're my families. It's together. But anyway, I tell my families that ALS doesn't happen in a vacuum. So what the heck do I mean by that? Whatever was going on in your family before ALS, the intruder showed up, that's still there. So for example, if there were some marriage issues, you know, those don't magically get better because the intruder has shown up. In fact, ALS kind of shines a spotlight on all of the personality qualities that you had before the ALS came into your life, and it shines a spotlight on how we behave as a family. So it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it's not the only thing that we can deal with, so there's a lot to do for a patient and family when the intruder comes into your life. And just as ALS is, I can't think of the word. It's an equal opportunity intruder. Cuts across all socioeconomic statuses, all races. By the same token, the most important question that I get from everybody, regardless of all of those other variables that determine who you are, everybody wants to know, how do we help the kids? How can I make this to be not as bad for my kids? Speaking of that question, it reminds me, I want to share, and I like to talk about the patients and families that I work with back in Chicago. I'm seeing this one family, and the patient is 50 and his wife is 50-ish. They have 3 kids. One just started college, one's in college, one just graduated. So whatever those ages are, I don't know, you tell me. Mine aren't there yet. But she called last week, and we had actually just had a lengthy home visit, and she said, there's something bothering me, can you talk? Yeah, what's going on? And she kind of wanted to try and predict how each of her kids would react when they came home from school. Oh, this one I think is feeling this way, I think this one sees things that way, and if I know beforehand, then I can help them better. And I totally understood her logic as a mom. I like to be that controlling whenever I can too with my children, but if you have children, you know that's pretty tough to do because they have their own little minds and hearts. And we really cannot predict because their emotions are also a moving target. You'll find I like that expression because it helps us keep perspective. Their emotions change from day to day, and their emotions are not always and only about the ALS, and I will get to that. We all have different styles of communicating with our kids. Some of us clearly like to chat more than others and are a little bit more open with all subjects, you know, from everything like stranger danger to sex and relationships to illness and death. We'll bring it all up with our kids. Some people were raised in a family where maybe things weren't quite that open, and that's how they feel comfortable with their children. But no matter who you are or how you talk with your kids, I haven't met anybody ever who didn't feel like they wanted to talk about how can I talk to my kids? Because that is the most difficult thing. How do I talk to my kids? How do I help my children? So I will see if I can do the slides while I'm just walking around chatting. Give you a few hints on talking with the children. The first thing may seem obvious, but over the years I've found some very different strategies that families have taken. So I really, really encourage people to be honest. You have to tell the kids the truth. Now, of course, the truth is not just one blanket statement for every child of every age at the same moment in time. You know, you have to talk with your 7-year-old much differently than you talk with your 11-year-old or your 17-year-old. And I don't yet know what ages are in your families, but I will be happy to hear that if you want to share it at some point, because I'd really like to know about your families. But I'll kind of talk about all ages through this program, and then you can let me know more specifics. But anyway, the thing that we really want to avoid is having your child hear about this from somebody else. It's not irreparable, but it's definitely something that you want to avoid, and here's the reason. Because the ALS is something we cannot protect them from. We cannot protect the kids and pretend that it doesn't exist. We can, however, protect them by letting them know that they can still trust the people that they've always been the closest to in the whole wide world, which is hopefully their parents, both of them. So we don't want them finding out from someone else, and I have a couple examples for you of how I've heard about this recently that makes me think this, I just have to remember to tell everybody that this is so extremely important. I see one family, this guy just had his 40th birthday celebration, okay? So that's difficult enough in and of itself, and his disease is not moving very slowly. They have 3 kids who are 3, 5, and 7. Apparently, the 7-year-old came home one day and said that another child told him, "Your daddy's gonna die. Are you gonna die too?" Now, they had discussed the dad's illness, but just a very teeny tiny little bit. And I understand that. And I know that they weren't feeling like they could do it yet. But we want to avoid them hearing it from someone else. So it's something to keep in mind if you haven't spoken with your kids already, or if you know people back home or in support groups or online that you talk with. This is the reason that we don't want to wait, as difficult as it is. And I hear a little one over that. It reminds me of all these most important things I'm talking about, the kids. The children do observe more than we think. We think they may not notice things. They do. They may not tell you they saw it or they heard it, but they don't miss it very much. So another 2 quick examples. On a little girl who's 8, there's she, another sister who's 6, and then a little one who's 2, and their mom has the disease. And one day, just outside on the swing set with their dad, who had just gotten home from work, she said, "Oh, come on, Dad. We know what's going on with Mom. We know what's going to happen." So I got a phone call very quickly thereafter. And then another girl she actually knew. She actually knew. Now, how, I'm not sure, although her mom can't speak, her mom is not real steady, there's a lot of things her mom can't do. And they don't hide the term ALS, so did this child get online? Did someone tell her? We don't know. But it just reminds me to share the fact that that's something you have to put a lot of your emotional energy into, is making sure you've talked with the kids. So, anyway, so we won't go into the other example, but the point is that if your family members, like if your extended family or friends, or if you're involved in the school system, if people who know your kids know that you have ALS, then you need to talk to your kids before somebody slips. And it could be very innocent and, just something that happens, but you don't want them to hear about it from anywhere else. You want them to hear about it from you. So sometimes families the couples in the family have chosen to wait to share it with friends because they didn't feel like they were quite ready to talk with the kids. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. So keep in mind, none of the teachers and nobody at soccer will say anything. They will. Or, I don't get this, sometimes parents tell their 8-year-old kids about their friend's mom. I'm not sure what makes them do that, but they do. And then your child hears about it from the 8-year-old at soccer. And that's something, again, it's not irreparable, but we definitely want to avoid it if we can. So that speaks to the issue I mentioned before, which is putting your own mask on first. You need to do what you need to do to gather all your emotional strength as much as you can. So whatever that means for you, because we're all different. And in addition, when you say to me, well, how do I tell them then? If I'm the patient, do I have to tell my kids by myself? Do I do it with my spouse or partner? How do we do this? And my answer is, whatever way makes you feel the strongest. If you have parents that you're close with and who are close with your kids, and it would help to have them there, keeping in mind that the parents may be too emotional to do that though. But if they can be a help, have them there. If you have a really good friend, my best friend is Auntie Kim to my kids for their whole lives. She's their godmother, she's Auntie Kim. You have that friend, that source of strength right there with you when you're telling them. Because you need to be at your best, for lack of a better way to put it. You won't be at your best, but the strongest you can be when you tell the kids what's going on. Now, when you tell them, and after that, of course, there is emotion. And I say, don't fear emotion. It's not a bad thing, and it's not a bad thing for the kids to see it. What makes it negative is when the kids see it and we shut them out. That's what makes the kids feel like there's something really horrible going on. Versus, let's say, as always happens in my house, you think they're sleeping, and they're not. and you see a face poke around, and they hear something or they overhear you on the phone, you had a chance to talk with someone, you didn't think they were in the house, maybe you thought they were still out riding their bike, whatever. Just thinking of things that happened in my house the other day when I was on a work call. But the point is that if your child sees your emotion, if you're in a couple, your emotion together, it is okay to let them know I'm feeling really sad or I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Name the feeling for them, because you can bet that your child is feeling it too. So that way you do two things for your child. One, you're giving it a name, which makes it less scary. Two, you are modeling the fact that it's okay to have those feelings, because if your parents have those feelings, it must be okay. Unless they're teenagers, and then nothing you do is okay, and that's a different story. But for the other kids, the younger kids, it's two good lessons for them. And it also reduces the stress level, because I've seen families where they didn't, well, we can't cry. I think she saw me crying. It's okay. But then what you want to do is say, come here, Mommy's just feeling kind of sad, and you open your arms up if you're able to do so, and if not, you tell them to come to you and say a hug makes it better. Now you've done two other things for your child. Number one, you've let that child be with you instead of separating her or him from what's going on. And two, you've empowered that child, not to take care of you, but hey, I can do something that actually helps. This disease is a disease of helplessness for everybody involved with it. We all feel it. From the patient to the family to the friends to the professionals, we all feel it. So imagine those little people feeling it, and here's something you can do. Those hugs make me feel so much better. So these are gifts you can give to the kids on an everyday basis that really do help them. Okay, whoops, here's the little clicker thing. Okay. Don't give, this is a quote I just want to share with you. This came from a patient of mine when he was 34 years old. That was about maybe 9 or 10 years ago. He doesn't live in Chicago, which is why I'm not keeping very good track of it. But he was at clinic one day and he said to me, I always have such a good time when I get a chance to talk with you. And I said, well, thank you. Did you want to schedule a home visit? Because that's really what I do most of the time. No. Okay, did I do anything wrong? No. I still like going to work. And you know what, Lori? I am just not going to give this disease any more of me than it will take. And I've shared that with a lot of patients over the years, because that's not me. That's the wisdom of somebody else in their shoes. That is also easier said than done, because some days you just don't feel the emotional strength and you feel like you're giving it more. But on those days where you're feeling better, don't give it any more than it's already taken. You don't want to give the disease any more power than the darn thing already has. Okay. Reassure, reassure, reassure. What the heck is she talking about? 3 things. You want to make sure to reassure your kids that they will be loved and cared for. I call it the, but who's going to make my lunch syndrome? Because up to a certain age, that's one of the most important things in their life. Think about it when they're going to school. Who's making my lunch today? Or what's in my lunch today? Or am I buying lunch? Right? That's a daily thing. So while it may seem callous, that's their world. And we want to reassure the kids that their world will remain intact. Even though as adults, we know darn well at some point it will not be intact the way we want it to be. They're not in our heads. They don't know what it might have been. So you want to work with them on the concrete issues that matter to them. So whatever ways you do it in your family and your relationship with your kids, you reassure them. It's okay, and I can't make the lunch now, but Mom will make the lunch, or Dad will make, or whoever. However it will be done. Their world you want to stay intact as best as you can do that for them. Oh, the part about loving and caring for them. There are a lot of families recently that I've talked with where kids have asked the parents, and one was in the family I just told you about with the 3 girls, where they said to the dad, so the mom has ALS, and they said to the dad, yeah, but if you die too, who's going to take care of us? She's 8. So you need to know that. If you're a parent, you really should know that anyway. This is just my little aside. If you're fortunate enough to not have ALS in your life, you should know if there's a God forbid, who's taking care of your kids? Because we don't know from day to day. Believe me, been there, know what I'm talking about. If ALS, the intruder, shows up, then you definitely need to know. If you're not able, if the other parent isn't able, who is taking care of them? That's not something you may need to announce to the kids, but you should definitely be ready for the question. Because I've heard it so much, and from such young kids, it really blew me away. It blew the dad away too. The other 2, reassure, are you want to make sure that the kids know that they didn't cause it and that the patient didn't cause it. Because kids tend to take responsibility in ways that we can't even imagine. So they might think, oh, if I hadn't said that bad word and made her mad, or something else that seems really crazy to us, but they don't understand why it's happening, so they attribute their own ideas to it. So you need to make darn sure that your kids do not think that they had anything to do with it, or that you as the patient did anything wrong. I can't imagine what that would be anyway. You didn't do anything, or not do anything to get the disease. Okay, now presuming that your kids know, and hopefully this is part of life with a capital L, as I like to say it, in your family. Keep the saying an open door policy. You want to keep an open the door policy. What does that mean? What I share with my families is that we can't expect the kids to come and say, I have questions about this. I need to know this or this. They don't do that. Kids can't sit down and have therapy for an hour like we can, or chatter like I'm doing today. They sort of do it in very small snippets. They also need to know that the topic is okay to bring up. So my suggestion is that you as the grown-ups open the door to the conversation on a pretty regular basis. It doesn't have to be every day, but every week, every couple weeks, and it doesn't have to be a big, huge thing. For example, if you've had a doctor's visit, oh, I saw the doctor, and the doctor said that these muscles are still working really well. Just something that opens it up. Or what if you have a fall? Again, God forbid, you're the patient and you have a fall. Then hopefully, I'm sure it won't be at that moment, but maybe the next day or the next day after that, you want to say, oh, I was so scared when I fell. Or have your spouse say that. I was so scared when Dad fell. Made me really mad that that's happening to him. Same thing, you're opening the door, you're letting them know that those emotions are okay. Don't expect them to come in through the door, by the way, because you're going to probably have to open that thing, I don't know how many times, it depends on your kids. 20, 30, I don't know. Many, many times. Just open the door without the expectation that they'll come walking in and share with you. It doesn't mean you aren't helping them, you are. You just have to trust me on this one. Open the door, because when the day comes that they need to tell you something, they will know in their heart of hearts that the door's open and it's okay to bring it up. All right, normalcy. Sounds easy enough. However, I find for all of my ALS families that that is a very hard commodity to come by. And it takes a lot of work and effort to make it happen. So if normalcy in your household is one parent working, 2 parents working, however many kids are in school, whatever it is, and the activities that your kids have always done, normalcy is for those things to happen as much as possible. Again, easier said than done, but good to keep in mind. The goal is normalcy, And I want to share something with you about that just came up last week. I was talking with, I think she's 50 now, 50 or 51-year-old woman who has familial ALS. Her mom died of it, her aunt, her grandmother, a lot of people. She's got 3 kids in high school. Right there, that's very sad. But, so a 14-year-old whose parent has ALS is a 14-year-old first. They're not an ALS 14-year-old. They're a 14-year-old whose parent has ALS. It's not just a matter of semantics. There's a big difference, because that means that you get the joys of teenagerhood while you have to deal with ALS. So in this particular conversation with this fabulous woman with whom I've been working for, I don't know, 3-4 years, wonderfully, I get to lose track sometime. But she was very upset this day because she said, the kids aren't really spending as much time with me anymore. Okay, so I asked her some questions before making assumptions, as I've been known to do, especially trying to be protective of patients. But you know, after a while, you realize that families are not usually trying to hurt each other. So I asked her what she meant. Okay, her 17-year-old, who's a senior, has a boyfriend for the first time. Her, how old is he? 15-year-old has a new group of friends and is kind of finding herself socially, and her 14-year-old is a boy who is just the most stereotypic teenage boy going nuts in high school with all the girls. He is. So they're not trying to ignore their mom. They're being kind of normal kids. So what I told her is, in a twisted way, it's kind of twisted logic, but this is actually really positive, because your kids are behaving like normal teenagers. They're not feeling like they can't leave your side. They're not feeling overburdened by responsibility. They're going out and annoying you because they're not answering their texts. Now that's a different ballgame, right? They should answer their texts. But my point is, that's normal stuff. And what I said to her was, you would be dealing with this even if the intruder had not shown up. She started to cry. And I said, but I know, if you didn't have ALS, you'd be dealing with it differently. And she nodded. And that's the part I know is so hard for you, and why I say I know this is easier said than done, because sometimes you can't speak or you can't yell at them when really that's the best thing in the world that you'd like to do. So you have to find other ways to communicate. But the point is that sometimes when you're the most frustrated with your kids, you can shift the paradigm just a little bit and realize, well, I guess that's good that they're acting like normal kids, whatever that is these days, but the goal is normalcy. All right, normalcy takes a village. It takes a village. This is a theme that has come up a lot recently, at least in my work, and it may not be relevant for you, so move me along. But what I'm finding is a lot of families who are having big difficulty accepting help. And their comments to me are, but I've always been the giver. And I understand that as a social worker. You know, I try to be a giver myself, but sometimes the tables are turned. And even if you can't, not be a taker. That's what somebody told me the other day. I can't be a taker. I said, you don't have to be a taker. You need to be a receiver, though, or you will never be able to keep up with all you have to do, because she had slept 4 hours the night before, staying up doing laundry so that she could keep up with the schedule the next day. And I'm sure all of you know that the caregiver spouse cannot do everything. It's impossible. You can't. Even if you'd like to be an overachiever like some of us, you cannot do everything. So you need to figure out, what jobs do you do? You know, jobs, chores, responsibilities, whatever you want to call them, in a week, in a month, and which of those things can you delegate? Who can help you, and how? I was working with a family 2 weeks ago, and they seem to be kind of like on an island. They're pretty new to me. It was only like my 3rd visit. And I thought, well, not everybody has a social network, or their family doesn't live in town, and not everybody is connected to a religious community. Okay, we've seen all kinds of families. Maybe they're really that isolated. No. Then I found out, oh no, well, I told my friends at work not to bring any dinners. And I told our neighbor not to cut the lawn for us. Okay, and you can imagine that this went on and on. So that was when I talked to this couple about the circle of care that I think you guys from the association introduced many years ago, the nurses did. And it's a way of sort of visualizing and thinking about for a family the fact that it takes a village, it takes a whole circle of people, kind of putting their metaphoric arms around you and helping you. You have to let them. Even if you've never accepted the help before, you have to let people help, because almost always there are people willing to do it. There's a few situations, for those of you who are the professionals in the crowd, or I'm sure you've seen this as well, but most of the time there are people who can help. And my analogy, I don't like to use this after the recent current events that happened in our world in Boston, but I used to call this the pressure cooker, that ALS is like a pressure cooker. Now you see why I don't like to say that, but you guys don't mind if I use it here, I hope. ALS is like a pressure cooker. There's so much stress on a daily basis. It's insidious and it's intrusive, thus the name The Intruder. And anything you can do to poke even a little tiny hole in that pressure cooker will release a ton of steam. And you're so used to feeling all that pressure, you can't even imagine what it would feel like to let someone help and let some of the steam off. But so for those of you who are the professionals, I encourage you to encourage your families to do it. And for those of you who are the important people here, those with the disease or family members, you truly are the important people here. I can't encourage you enough to accept help. If people say, what can I do? You need to make a little list of things that would be helpful. I'm not saying you have to pay for a lawn service, because most of us don't have a money tree in the backyard, and I know how expensive your disease is. But there's a lot of teenagers who would mow the lawn cheaply, or if they're smart, they'll do it for nothing because you have ALS. But even if it's 15 bucks, things like that. Put those things in place. If you have somebody who could be there when your kids get home from school, even, again, if it's a teenager, because I don't know about you, I have a 9-year-old daughter. I am chopped liver if there's a teenage girl around. I am, it's like, wasn't I the one up with you last night till 1? Doesn't matter. But that's normal kid stuff. So enlist a teenager, enlist a friend. You have got to accept help. One other point I wanted to share, sort of along these lines, but once you tell the kids, by the way, a really great thing to do is to have a plan of what you're going to do after you tell the kids. If you haven't done this already, enlist the help of your closest friends, or if you're fortunate enough to have sisters, whoever it is. The kids are going to go bowling, or going out to dinner. You're going to rock their world, and then you're going to show them that their family is going to stay intact as their family. Sounds crazy, but it works. So along those lines, once you've told them, we tend to think that everything that happens within the family has to do with ALS, or has to do with the kid's fear of the parent dying. I'm going to just be really blunt. I hope that's okay. So I have a great example for you of how I learned after all these years that I'm wrong. This was a 9-year-old who started having trouble in school, and her mom has the disease, and I really thought that with the changes in her mom, she was worrying that this meant her mom was dying. Okay, you should always be ready to learn from kids because you'll be a much smarter person. So Maddie teaches me, when I ask her the questions instead of making assumptions, that she's worried her mom's gonna fall. Because Maddie happened to have been home the year before and was the only one home when her mom fell. Her mom didn't know she could fall at that point in time. Now that she does, there's someone there with her. But the point is, this is still a fear for the child. And I was just positive she was thinking that her mom was going to die. I was wrong, and it was a good thing I kept quiet. But she taught me a lesson that day, and I wanted to share it with you. Not everything is about that fear. Another child who's 10, whose dad has the disease, had been acting out with her mom, really kind of obnoxiously. And her mom was beside herself and said, "Could you come and talk with us?" Okay, I'll try, and I'm thinking, oh, this is all about the ALS. No. The mom was spending so much time with the little sister because the little sister did cheerleading. And I didn't know this because I don't have a cheerleader, but apparently you can go out of state for competitions, and it can be 4 nights a week, and it can be a very big project. Mom was taking the little sister every evening. This had nothing to do with ALS. This had to do with her anger at her mom for never being home. Do I think it also had to do with ALS? It did, because her dad couldn't coach her soccer team either, but that wasn't the main issue. So I share this with you because it comes from the wisdom of kids, which makes it the smartest things I could tell you. Okay, now I know that this is our little support group for families who have ALS in the family. All the things that I've said definitely apply to that, but in addition, I want to just make a few points for you in particular. I know that your families have even more complicating layers to deal with. I sort of look at it as families who have ALS, families with children who have ALS, and then families with children who have a familial form of the disease. Very complicated, a lot of emotion, a lot of concerns. So the question then is how do you address the worry of your kids for their future as part of a fALS family? And my humble suggestions would be, number one, I don't think I wrote these down, hang on. I'm so sorry, I was so excited. No, that goes to the next thing I'm gonna say. Anyway, number one, be as positive as you can around your kids about your hope for the next generation. Even if that may not be what you think, I mean, don't lie, stick with the honesty, but when you are feeling hopeful, you want to impart that on your kids. You know what, there's more research being done in the last 10 years than in the last 100 years, and that's the truth. So I really think something's going to happen. I always tell my families that I intend to be here when the breakthrough happens, and I'll throw the party. It will be okay, it will be great. And my kids say, but you won't have a job. And I say, that's okay. It would be a good reason not to have a job, really. It'll be a great party. They don't understand me, but that's okay. Anyway, another thing that I think is important to tell the kids is that there are a lot of diseases that run in families, not just ALS, although certainly this is huge. There's a lot of things that run in families. It doesn't mean that you'll get it. It doesn't mean that everyone will get it. If your kids know it's in the family, again, depending on their age, there's so many different ways to talk to them about it. But a good thing to say for any age is it doesn't mean you'll get it, doesn't mean we will all get it. It runs in the family. That doesn't mean everybody. Truth, right? But also leans towards the positive side of things. If you're dealing with young adults who understand genetics, You may want to have them talk to someone wonderful, a genetic counselor. But again, that's for, I think, 18 and up, where you would even begin that kind of conversation. But I know some of you probably have that. Yeah?
My 7th grader learned all about genetics this year.
Okay.
And has a full understanding of genotypes, phenotypes. So they're learning it early.
They're learning it in 7th grade. Okay, okay. And did your 7th grader understand that that meant in your family with this disease, or were they kind of thinking, hopefully, more along the lines of like brown hair and eyes?
No.
No.
They start with brown hair and eyes.
Yeah.
And they went and they used cystic fibrosis as an
They
example.
did, okay.
So they really went, pretty in depth, like, I don't want to, make this.
No, go ahead. I
Oh.
said ask me questions.
Oh, no. I was going to bring this up, when we got to time for questions, is that, because they are in school learning so much sooner about genetics, it's just, it gets so difficult. And I totally agree with being truthful, but like you said, we're in this other layer of then you're saying if they're asking questions, yes, it can run in the family, but now it's, I've just learned about genetics. I want to know, what are my chances? Like how do you answer, to a 13-year-old? That's, where I personally am, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that.
I just want you to know I knew you'd have really good and difficult questions. Really, no, that's an awesome question. It doesn't come with an easy answer, but always the truth, and the question is how much truth? You want to make sure that if your child says to you, what are my chances of getting this? I mean, if they say something else, I would ask, well, what are you asking me? Because you don't want to presume that question unless you get it. But that's sort of like the child who says, well, are you going to die? Once that question's out, you have to answer it. I would say something that may be the truth. I'm not sure in your family because I just got to meet everybody. But if possible, if it is the truth, I would tell that 13-year-old that that information has to be explained by a genetic counselor, that there isn't a hard and fast percentage, and if you get it, see, I would lean towards that if you do have the gene for it. This is what I've been taught by Dr. Sadiq, who seems to know what he's talking about. If you do have the gene, there's no guarantee that means it will be expressed in you. And if it is going to be expressed, we don't know at what age. So I'm not trying to not answer your question, but I don't know the answer, and I don't know that anyone knows it right now. So I'm trying to focus on the fact that there's more research being done and see if that child is still asking, which I would be surprised, but you never know, then you might have to connect with a genetic counselor. You could talk to a 13-year-old, couldn't you? Pediatric. Yeah.
I was just going to say,
Oh.
Isn't it also important to differentiate between familial or genetic and contagious?
Yes, excellent point. Thank you. Such a good point, especially for the younger kids. But I think the older kids, that's a great point. I got to put that in there. I always put a pen with my notes because I always have such a great suggestion when I'm talking. So thank you. I'll put that in. You do need to differentiate between genetic and contagious, and that there's a huge difference because we don't want kids to stop hugging patients. They can't get it. All right, really quick, let me just give you, there's like 3 things here, and then I'll be quiet. You guys can ask any questions you want. The things I want you to take away from this: normalcy, normalcy, normalcy. It is a really valuable commodity. Anything you can do, but part of that will be accepting help. Okay, so you want to try and have as much normalcy as possible. And I totally understand that your life is not normal anymore. I get that. But if your child is used to going to, okay, we'll just say, for example, my 12-year-old, basketball and lacrosse and playing Xbox, and you're able to make that happen, maybe you get somebody who picks that child up for practice, and you try and go to the games, but you don't have to take your child to every practice. That feels normal to the child. your kids can be okay. Your kids will not be the same as if there was no ALS in this family. I don't want to sound like Pollyanna and where you go, what is she talking about? They're not okay. There's ALS in this family. You're right. However, the kinds of things we all hear about or see in the movies where kids get really, really messed up usually happen when there's no conversation between the parents and the kids about what the heck is going on in the family. So if you weren't the kind of person who really liked to yak and be open, which is, not always the best thing, but you have to lean in that direction, or maybe your spouse or partner is more like that, or maybe your best friend is like that. You have to have somebody who the child can trust to do that for him or her. But they can be okay. They won't be the same as if the intruder hadn't shown up. I give you that, but they can be okay. It's really important to validate those fears that they have and give them truthful information. All right, we're already talking about that. Last but not least, always just tell them the truth, and when you're not sure what to do or say, follow your heart. You gotta believe in your heart. So if you remember nothing else and you remember those things, I hope it will help guide you, because you're in a really difficult position, and I was not making it up when I said that you're my heroes, and I'm grateful to have been asked to talk with you today. So questions, enough of what I have to say. Let me hear what else you have to say.
If you have a question, please ask in
Yeah.
the mic, because we're recording this.
So at what age would you start to tell a child that there is a genetic and a familial ALS, as opposed to just ALS?
Just ALS.
Yeah.
Very
so
good
maybe
question.
they just see their parent, but then they don't necessarily have any reason to think that it's inherited.
It could happen to them, right. I thought about putting that in there, and I didn't, because it's such a hard question. But I think a lot of things depend on what's going on in your family. So for example, the woman that I told you about before, the one with the 3 teenagers, because right there, that's a challenge, let alone the fact that she's in a wheelchair, 3 teenagers. But they know that their grandmother died of it, their aunt died of it, they know it's in their family. If this is the first time that it's happened with anyone they know of, I don't think that it's necessary to tell this to them until the point probably where they're getting into middle school, where they would start learning about genetics, and I would try and mention it to them before they hear about that in school. Say, sometimes people talk about things running in families, and give them a little bit of information. And each child will be different in how they respond to you. Some will want to know all, like yours, and some will say, okay, gotta go. But then they'll know the door's open. So I'm not skirting the issue by not giving you a set answer, because there isn't a set answer, because I really have so much respect for the individuality of every family and every child within that family. Anything else? I know I was the cleanup batter today. So it's a good thing I'm a baseball lover, because I thought, oh, bat and cleanup, I guess that's good. But they're going to need to get out of here.
Well, Lori, I really appreciate you joining us. Can you put your contact information up there? Do you
Yes,
have that on your
thought
slide?
I apologize, because I thought I had that slide and I didn't, but I do have cards. So can I just share cards with you? Would that be okay?
So thank you again, Lori, for bringing
Oh
some
my
very
gosh,
practical
thank you for
information.
having me. There you go. You're welcome.